My grandpa always thought I was doing great in college, until he found out I was actually sleeping in my car behind the diner where I worked. Stay with me, because this is the part of my life I never wanted anyone to know, but it changed everything for me. It started 2 semesters ago, when the rent for my tiny apartment went up, and my savings mysteriously ran dry. I was 21, studying nursing at Millbrook University, juggling 2 jobs. Mornings at Billy's Diner and nights at a gas station off Route 7. I kept telling everyone I was fine. My classmates thought I was just busy. My coworkers thought I had a rough home life. Nobody knew that when my shifts ended, I climbed into the back seat of my rusty Toyota Corolla, folded down the seats, and slept there with a blanket I'd gotten from the campus lost and found. The nights were the hardest. The parking lot behind the diner was safe enough, but it still scared me whenever headlights swept past or a drunk customer lingered too long after closing. I kept pepper spray under my pillow and prayed every night that no one would knock on my window. I learned to change clothes in public restrooms and keep dry shampoo and baby wipes in my backpack. I told myself it was temporary, that as long as I kept working and studying, I'd make it out of this mess. I didn't tell my family. My mom, Diane, had remarried a man named Rick who managed our finances after my dad passed away. When I asked about my college fund, the money Dad left for me, Mom said the market had gone bad and that they were handling it. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that my parents would never leave me stranded. So I smiled through our short phone calls, said classes were great, and pretended I had roommates. But every day, the lie got heavier. My grades started slipping from exhaustion. My hands shook from too much coffee and too little sleep. I'd look at the other students walking to class in clean clothes, laughing with friends, and feel invisible. There were moments I wanted to call my grandpa Walter, but I couldn't. He was proud of me, always bragging about his smart granddaughter becoming a nurse. I didn't have the heart to ruin that image. So, I kept living 2 lives, one for the world, one in the shadows of my car. When customers at the diner complained, I smiled wider. When my manager yelled, I apologized faster. Anything to keep my job. Anything to keep surviving. I didn't know it yet, but the night my grandpa found me, sleeping behind that diner, was the night my entire world would crack open. And for once, it wouldn't be me breaking quietly in the dark. I used to believe my mother would never hurt me. Even when things didn't add up, I found ways to explain them. She was my mom, the woman who packed my lunches, kissed my forehead before school, and said, "Everything I do is for you." But somewhere between those words and the truth, I lost everything my father left behind. When my dad died, I was 16. He had a life insurance policy and savings that were supposed to help me go to college. Grandpa Walter wanted to manage it, but Mom insisted she and Rick could handle things. Rick was her new husband, charming, loud, and always full of promises. He called me kiddo and acted like he cared, but there was always something fake behind his smile, something calculating in the way he looked at money. On my 18th birthday, Mom said there were some documents I needed to sign to make things official. She said it was just to transfer my dad's fund into an account with my name on it. I remember sitting at the dining table, the smell of her perfume thick in the air, signing where she pointed. I didn't even read it. She said, "Trust me, honey. Families don't keep secrets." I smiled and signed because I wanted to believe her. It wasn't until college that things started feeling wrong. I'd ask about my tuition fund, and she'd sigh, saying, "The market crashed, sweetie. We're working on it." When I pushed for details, Rick would jump in, laughing. "Relax, Lena. You think money just grows on trees." I'd feel small every time, guilty for even asking about the money my father left for me. That guilt was how they controlled me. Every question I asked turned into an accusation. Every doubt became me being ungrateful. I started noticing little things. New furniture, a remodeled kitchen, my stepbrother Mason suddenly driving a brand new truck for his business startup. Mom said they were just blessings, and that I should focus on school. But blessings don't come from stolen money. There were nights when I'd lie in the backseat of my car, staring at the roof, replaying every memory of home. The fake smiles, the promises, the guilt trips. I realized how many times they'd made me feel like I owed them, like I was a burden. Every conversation was a performance. My mother would say she was proud of me, then remind me how expensive college was. Rick would tell jokes about investing in the wrong kid. They thought I didn't notice, but I did. I just didn't have the strength to face it yet. Grandpa called me every few weeks, asking if I was doing okay, if I needed anything. I always said, "I'm fine, Grandpa. Everything's good." Because if he knew the truth, that his granddaughter was broke, homeless, and betrayed by her own mother, I knew he'd burn the world down for me. And back then, I still hoped there was something left worth saving. The night before my 22nd birthday, I worked both shifts again. First at the diner, then at the gas station until dawn. By the time I parked behind Billy's diner, my body felt like it had turned to lead. I pulled the blanket over myself, cracked the window just enough to breathe, and told myself I'd only nap for an hour before class. The next thing I knew, sunlight was spilling through the windshield, and someone was knocking on the glass. At first, I thought it was my manager, maybe a cop. I sat up, hair tangled, eyes still foggy from sleep. But when I saw the tall figure outside, dressed in a gray coat and holding a small birthday gift bag, my heart dropped straight to the floor. It was Grandpa Walter. For a second, neither of us moved. His expression shifted from confusion to something I'll never forget, the kind of heartbreak that steals the air from your lungs. He opened the door gently, like he was afraid I'd vanish if he moved too fast. "Lena," he said, voice trembling. "Why are you here? Why are you in your car?" I wanted to speak, to make up a lie, but all that came out was a shaky laugh. "I was just taking a break," I said, brushing crumbs off my seat. But the blanket, the pillow, the scattered notebooks, they told the truth I couldn't hide anymore. He looked at me for a long time, eyes glassy. "You live here," he whispered. Not a question. A realization. My throat tightened. Shame hit me harder than exhaustion ever had. I tried to look away, but he reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "get out of the car." We drove in silence to a small cafe downtown. I kept my hands wrapped around the mug of coffee like it was an anchor. Grandpa didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was calm, but I could feel the anger hiding beneath it. "Your mother told me you were living in a nice apartment near campus. That you were doing great. So tell me, why were you sleeping in a car?" Tears came before I could stop them. I told him everything, the money, the lies, the excuses. How I worked 2 jobs just to survive. How I didn't want him to worry. I kept apologizing between sobs, but he stopped me, his hand steady over mine. "Don't you dare apologize," he said. "They failed you, not the other way around." I couldn't look him in the eye. I'd spent months pretending to be strong, but sitting across from him, I felt like a child again, tired, scared, and broken. When he stood up, his face was pale but determined. "We're going to fix this," he said quietly. "I promise you, Lena. They won't get away with this." And for the first time in months, I let myself believe him. The waitress had just set down our pancakes when Grandpa leaned back in his chair and asked, almost casually, "Lena, how much money did your father leave you?" His tone was gentle, but his eyes were sharp. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. I'd been hoping we could talk about anything else, school, the weather, even the coffee, but not this. "I don't really know," I said quietly. "Mom said it was around 100,000 when Dad passed. But they invested it, and then the market went bad." Grandpa's jaw tensed. "They invested it, huh?" He sipped his coffee, thinking. "And you never saw any records? Statements? Nothing." I shook my head. They handled everything. I just trusted them. He didn't say a word after that. He took out his phone, called someone, and stepped outside. Through the cafe window, I saw him pacing, one hand in his pocket, the other holding the phone tight against his ear. His calmness scared me more than if he'd yelled. When he came back, he didn't sit right away. He just stood there, looking at me like he was trying to process something impossible. "Lena," he said finally, voice low but steady, "I just spoke to my attorney. We pulled up your father's trust record. There was exactly $100,000 left to you when you turned 18. As of last year, only $2,947 remains." My stomach dropped. "That can't be right," I whispered. He slid his phone across the table, showing me the screen, the account history, the withdrawals, the names. "It's right," he said. "They took $97,000, Lena. Almost every cent." I covered my mouth, shaking my head. "No, there must be some mistake. Mom said." He cut me off, his voice sharper now. "She lied to you. They both did." Tears blurred my vision. "Please, Grandpa, don't go after them. I can't handle more drama. I just wanted to finish school, that's all." He sat down across from me again, eyes softening for a moment. "Sweetheart," he said, reaching across the table to hold my trembling hand, "I know you want peace. But they started this war the day they stole from their own daughter." I couldn't stop crying. I kept thinking about all the nights I'd slept in that cold car, working until sunrise, while they remodeled their kitchen and took vacations. I'd been eating leftover fries from the diner while they were eating steak dinners. The betrayal was heavy, heavier than the exhaustion, heavier than the hunger. Grandpa stayed quiet for a while, just holding my hand. Then, with a quiet certainty, he said, "We're not letting this go. You've suffered enough. I'm going to fix what they broke." For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. But I also knew that once Grandpa got involved, there was no turning back. Grandpa didn't waste time. The morning after our talk, he made a few phone calls, and by evening, a private investigator named Mark Dalton was sitting in his office, a man with a sharp suit and even sharper eyes. I listened from the hallway as Grandpa explained everything: my parents, the missing money, the forged documents. Mark nodded, took notes, and promised to dig until there's nothing left to dig. That night, Grandpa insisted I move into his guest house. I tried to argue, but he wouldn't hear it. "You've spent enough nights in that car," he said, handing me a new key. "You deserve a bed and a door that locks." When I walked into the little cottage behind his house, I felt a strange kind of peace. It smelled like cedar and fresh linen, and for the first time in years, I slept without fear of someone knocking on my window. The days that followed felt both heavy and hopeful. Mark came by often, sharing small updates. I overheard him talking about tracing digital transfers, shell accounts, and bank statements that didn't match. I didn't understand all the details, but I could feel the truth closing in. 2 weeks later, Mark handed Grandpa a thick folder. I was sitting on the porch when Grandpa called me inside. "Sit down, Lena," he said quietly. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned. "We have proof." Inside that folder were copies of bank statements with my name, only they weren't mine. The signatures were shaky, uneven. Rick had forged them. The money had been slowly siphoned into an account under a fake company name registered to his stepbrother. There were receipts for home renovations, transfers to Mason's so-called business, and even luxury purchases under their names. Every page made me feel sicker. I stared at my own name printed on those stolen documents. He really did this?" I whispered. Grandpa nodded. "Yes, and your mother helped him cover it up." The words hit me like a punch. For years, I had convinced myself she was just misled, that she didn't know. But now, looking at her signature beside Rick's, I realized she had chosen to betray me too. Something inside me hardened that day. The girl who stayed quiet to keep peace was gone. I started walking taller, speaking louder, and finally saying no when people tried to guilt me. Grandpa noticed. One evening he said, "You remind me of your father when you stand up like that." Mark's work was done, but Grandpa wasn't finished. He called my mother and Rick, pretending he wanted to host a family dinner to celebrate my birthday properly. He asked them to come over that weekend. They agreed, probably expecting a fancy meal and forgiveness. But as Grandpa poured himself a drink that night, he looked at me and said, "They don't know it yet, but dinner's going to taste like the truth." The night of the dinner, the air inside Grandpa's mansion felt thick, like the walls themselves knew what was coming. The dining table was set perfectly, the silverware polished until it gleamed. My mother and Rick arrived right on time, dressed like they were attending a party. Mom brought a bottle of wine and hugged me tightly, pretending everything was normal. "You look thin, sweetheart," she said, smiling too brightly. Rick just gave me a nod and a smirk. Grandpa greeted them warmly, acting as though this was just another family meal. He poured drinks, cracked light jokes, asked about their house renovations. Mom laughed and played along, clearly relieved by the calmness in the room. I stayed mostly quiet, pushing food around my plate, heart pounding. I knew what was hidden inside the folder resting on the cabinet behind Grandpa, all the proof of what they'd done. We made it through dinner without a single argument. The tension was silent but alive, crawling under every polite word. Then dessert came, chocolate cake, my dad's old favorite. Grandpa cut a slice for everyone, then stood up slowly, his expression changing. "Before we eat," he said, voice steady but cold, "there's something we need to talk about." He walked to the cabinet, took the folder, and placed it on the table. "I had a few things looked into," he said, glancing at Rick. "Seems some of the family finances have strange movements." Rick chuckled nervously. "What's this about, Walter? You don't trust us?" Grandpa didn't answer. He opened the folder and started reading. On March 14th, 2019, $20,000 was transferred from Lena Hart's trust account into a business account under R&M Renovations. On June 3rd, another $25,000. And then again, another $52,000 over the next year. He looked up, his eyes sharp as glass. You recognize those transactions? My mother's face went pale. Rick's hands clenched. That's ridiculous, he snapped. You're mistaken. Grandpa slid the papers toward them. Then maybe you can explain your signatures. They both leaned forward and froze. I watched as the blood drained from my mother's face when she saw her own name scribbled in ink next to Rick's. Her lips trembled. Walter, it's not what you think. Oh, it's exactly what I think, Grandpa said quietly. You stole from your own child. Rick's mask shattered. She's lying. She's the one who wanted us to invest. Don't act like she's innocent. I couldn't move. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them under the table. The room spun between anger and heartbreak. I wanted to scream, to ask why they'd done it, but the words wouldn't come. Grandpa slammed his palm against the table, silencing everyone. You will repay every cent, or I will see you both in court. Rick stood up, shouting, calling me ungrateful. Grandpa didn't flinch. Get out, he said, his voice low but final. Security escorted them to the door. The sound of it closing echoed through the house, like the end of a chapter one never wanted to write. The days after the dinner felt strangely quiet, like the world was holding its breath. For years, I'd been used to chaos, guilt, shouting, pretending, but now there was only silence. A heavy, uneasy silence. Grandpa handled everything with the precision of a man who'd seen too many betrayals in his lifetime. He called his attorney, started the legal process, and told me not to worry about a thing. Within a week, local lawyers contacted my mother and Rick for a settlement. They tried to negotiate, to twist words, to delay, but Grandpa's lawyer was relentless. Every lie they told unraveled under the weight of evidence. The bank records, the signatures, the transfers, it was all too clear. They didn't stand a chance. One evening, my phone buzzed with a number I still knew by heart. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity won. Hello, Lena. My mother's voice cracked through the line, soft and trembling. Sweetheart, please. We can fix this. You don't have to destroy our family over money. I closed my eyes. That word, family, it used to mean everything to me. Now it felt like a knife. You destroyed it the moment you stole from me, I said quietly. She started crying harder. You don't understand what pressure we were under. Rick's business was struggling, and we thought we could pay it back. You've ruined us, sweetheart. We might lose the house. Your stepbrother's future. I didn't let her finish. Mom, I said, my voice steadier than I thought it could be. You already ruined me. I slept in a car while you built a new kitchen. Don't call me to ask for mercy when you never showed me any. Then I ended the call before she could answer. My hands were shaking, but for the first time, it wasn't from fear. It was from release. Grandpa was proud when I told him. He didn't say much, just smiled and squeezed my shoulder. You did the right thing, he said. You took your power back. He arranged to have my father's trust fully restored. This time, directly under my name. No one else could touch it again. The day the documents arrived, I stared at them for a long time. My name printed clearly, legally, finally mine again. It felt like closure, not just for the money, but for every time I'd been silenced or manipulated. With Grandpa's help, I dropped my night shift job at the gas station. I kept the diner job for extra cash, but mostly focused on school. He also suggested therapy. I resisted at first, but after one session, I understood why he insisted. Talking about the past didn't erase it, but it stopped it from owning me. Weeks passed. My grades improved. My laughter came back slowly, awkwardly, like sunlight after a long winter. And one night, as I lay in my bed in the little guest house, I realized something simple but powerful. I wasn't afraid to close my eyes anymore. For the first time in years, I fell asleep without a single tear. It was a gray Wednesday morning when the past decided to corner me again. I was leaving my psychology class, headphones in, coffee in hand, feeling almost normal for once. Then I saw him, Rick, leaning against a black SUV parked near the curb. My chest tightened instantly. He looked rougher, older, like the world had started cashing in on all his bad karma. Lena, he called out, his voice sharp and echoing across the campus lot. I froze, but before I could turn away, he was already striding toward me. His grin wasn't friendly. It was the same smirk I'd seen when he used to mock my old car, back when they all thought I was beneath them. You need to stop this nonsense, he said, lowering his voice but stepping too close. Drop the case, tell Grandpa you forgive us, and we'll all move on. You're making a fool of yourself. I clutched my backpack tighter. You mean I'm finally standing up to you? He laughed, shaking his head. You think this makes you strong? You're just using Grandpa's money to act righteous. You're still the same pathetic kid who begged for a place at our table. My heart was racing, but my phone was already recording in my pocket. If you're done insulting me, I said, I'd like to leave. He took another step forward, eyes dark. You think you can ruin my life and just walk away? That was when I looked him straight in the eye, really looked at him. All I saw was desperation. A man who'd lost everything and still blamed everyone but himself. You ruined your own life, I said softly, and I'm done paying for it. Then I turned and walked away, not looking back even as he shouted my name. The moment I got home, my hands were still shaking, but my mind was clear. I sent the audio to Grandpa's lawyer with a short message. He found me. Within hours, the lawyer replied. By the next morning, there was a restraining order in place. Rick couldn't come within 500 feet of me again. Grandpa came to see me that evening. He didn't yell or fume the way I expected. Instead, he sat beside me on the porch, watching the sunset. You handled that better than most adults would, he said quietly. You're not alone anymore, Lena. You never will be again. Something about those words cracked something open inside me. For so long, I'd been surviving, bracing for impact, fighting ghosts. But now, I finally realized strength wasn't about revenge or winning. It was about knowing when to walk away, when to protect yourself, when to say no. That night, I replayed the recording one last time before deleting it. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I no longer needed proof of what happened. The truth was already mine, and for the first time, it was enough. The final chapter of the storm didn't come with shouting or courtroom chaos. It came quietly, through phone calls, documents, and the slow, satisfying rhythm of justice unfolding behind closed doors. Grandpa's attorney, Mr. Reynolds, worked with the precision of a surgeon. Every forged signature, every false statement, every stolen dollar had a trail, and now it was all coming back home. Within a few months, the settlement was finalized. Diane and Rick were forced to sell their house. Ironically, the same one they had renovated using my college fund. Grandpa refused to let me attend the sale, but later that week, he showed me the photo of the sold sign in front of it. You don't need to see them lose it, he said gently. You just need to know they did. When the transfer hit my account, I stared at the screen for a long time. $97,000 plus damages. The number looked surreal. Not because of what it meant financially, but because of what it represented. Truth, vindication, and the end of years of gaslighting and guilt. Grandpa stood beside me, reading the bank statement over my shoulder. It's not about the money, he murmured. It's about setting things right. I nodded, but I still cried. I cried for the girl who once slept in her car, for the daughter who believed her mother's lies, for the silence I kept to keep the peace. Every tear that fell felt like a piece of the past leaving me for good. Grandpa, true to his character, chose not to press criminal charges. We'll end this with dignity, he said. Let the consequences find them without dragging our family through mud. But dignity didn't mean mercy. Quietly, through connections he never bragged about, he made sure Rick's business license was revoked. Within weeks, his company shut down. No headlines, no drama, just quiet accountability. One evening, while sorting through old papers, I found a photo of my dad, smiling beside his toolbox, grease on his hands, that look of quiet pride in his eyes. It hit me then how much he'd wanted me to have a future he never got. So I made a decision. I met with the college's financial office and set up a small scholarship fund in his name, the Daniel Hart Memorial Scholarship, for students working 2 jobs just like I had. It wasn't much yet, but it was something that would grow over time, something honest born out of all that pain. When I told Grandpa, he smiled, the kind of smile that made the world feel whole again. Your father would have been proud, he said softly. The pain didn't vanish. It never does. But it stopped defining me. I wasn't the broken girl sleeping in her car anymore. I was the woman who faced the truth, rebuilt her life, and turned betrayal into legacy. And in that quiet, steady justice, I finally found peace. The day of my graduation felt unreal. The sun was bright, the sky impossibly blue, and the campus that once felt like a battlefield now looked like a promise kept. As I stood in line, cap and gown in place, I caught sight of Grandpa in the front row. He wore his old navy blue suit, the one he said made him feel official. And when our eyes met, he smiled, a slow, proud smile that said we made it. When my name was called, I walked across the stage, each step heavier with memory. I thought of the nights I'd studied under the dim light in my car, the smell of coffee from Billy's diner clinging to my uniform, the ache in my legs after double shifts. I thought of all the times I wanted to give up but didn't. And when the dean placed that diploma in my hands, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just paper. It was proof. After the ceremony, Grandpa hugged me tighter than he ever had before. "Your father would have been so proud, Lena," he said, voice breaking a little. "You did everything they said you couldn't." I wanted to tell him I couldn't have done it without him, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just held on and let the moment speak for itself. With my trust fund restored, I finally bought a small apartment, a quiet space on the edge of town, nothing fancy but mine. The walls were plain, the furniture secondhand, yet it felt like luxury compared to the back seat of my old car. I framed my diploma above the desk, right beside a photo of Grandpa and me at the graduation. I kept the car, though. I couldn't bring myself to sell it. The dents, the scratches, the faint scent of diner fries. It was a part of me, a chapter that taught me more about strength than any classroom ever could. A few weeks after moving in, I drove back to Billy's diner one last time. The parking lot was nearly empty, just like it used to be when I'd crawl into the back seat after my shift. I parked in the same spot, turned off the engine, and sat there in silence. For a long time, I just watched the diner lights flicker and listened to the hum of passing cars. Then, quietly, I whispered, "Never again will I let anyone steal my peace." The words lingered in the air, soft but powerful. I smiled, started the engine, and drove off, not away from my past, but toward everything I had built beyond it. From the car that once felt like a cage, I had risen into a life of my own making. It wasn't revenge that set me free. It was reclaiming myself. And as the city lights reflected in my rearview mirror, I realized this was what healing truly looked like. Do you think Lena made the right choice by walking away from her family and rebuilding her life, or should she have tried to forgive them? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy powerful stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next one.